Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. It may have been the Canadian vaping industry's last hope. It's expected within the next 4 to 6 weeks that Health Canada could pull the trigger on its disastrous flavor ban for nicotine vaping products, which many believe could only be stopped by a change in national government. That change, of course, did not happen with the re-election of Justin Trudeau and the federal Liberals. Joining us today to discuss the impact of the 2021 federal election on the battle to save vaping is Darryl Tempest, Executive Director of the Canadian Vaping Association. Darryl, thanks for coming back on the show.
Brent, thank you for having me, and I'd like to thank you for the show and to your viewers and all of your sponsors. The content is important, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today.
And thanks for that. So, first off, does the return to power of Justin Trudeau and the federal Liberals help or hurt the effort to save vaping in Canada?
I think the election was an interesting one in the fact that we've returned to Parliament exactly as we've left it. If you look at, I don't think our fight is any harder or any easier than when the election took place. And I think a lot of Canadians would feel like that for a lot of issues. So the campaigns that were running before are equally as important as the campaigns that we're going to run now. That being said, if you look at what happens after you come back from a minority, as opposed to when you're going into an election, it weakens the PMO and the Prime Minister slightly, because the Prime Minister doesn't have that ability to threaten to call a snap election as a negotiation tool with the other parties, which gives the opposition parties and the smaller parties a lot more influence and power in policy making and decision making.
So overall, keeping that in mind, are the results of this election disappointing?
I think the results of this election were chosen by Canadians, and I think we all have to respect that and get back to our work, which is educating MPs. As you know, Brent, I was an extremely busy lobbyist with the 3 months leading up to the election. And what struck me with all the MP meetings that I had was the amount of MPs that didn't know a flavor ban was coming, didn't even know there was regulation or legislation around vaping, and had no engagement at a parliamentary level. So there's no knowledge.
That's astonishing, considering how much media coverage and hysteria has been around the so-called teen vaping epidemic in E-Valley and so forth.
Yeah, I think you'll see a lot of that came from media and health groups that were trying to make an issue. I think a lot more politicians that I've met at the provincial level were far more engaged than they were at a federal level. There's a saying, and I think your American viewers would understand and remember this politician. His name is Tip O'Neill. He said, all politics are local, which means that the job that we came to do prior to the election, which was to truly educate federal MPs, is more critical now than it ever was, considering the timelines that we're looking at. The best example I can give is out east. Even though the Liberals came into power through a minority, they lost the cabinet minister because they had an issue in fisheries, and they were from a coastal riding, and because the local residents were there, the Liberals lost a very senior and powerful cabinet minister. So engaging at those local levels is more important now than it ever has been.
When it comes to politics, is there much that can get done to try to hold off this flavor ban?
Oh, certainly. During the meetings prior, there was multiple MPs that said that they'd be willing to write a letter of support for their community. So the key themes that were coming through the MPs is they said, so you're telling me we're going to have less jobs and more smokers in our communities. So once you bring it down local, it means a lot more to the MPs there. And they're able to write the Minister of Health. Currently, it's Patty Haydu, but we'll see what happens after cabinet is formed shortly. If Patty's still the health minister, or if there's a different health minister, and making sure that they educate and share their concerns from their local community. So the more that shop owners and manufacturers can engage with their MPs, it lessens the burden, and it really highlights on Health Canada when it comes to, like, for example, all of the design, the poor design of Gazette 1 and all the glaring errors. So it gives us that opportunity to bring it down to either a caucus committee review, or, as you know, the TVPA is due for a full review at the end of April of 2022. So our contention, when we're talking to MPs, is no more regulatory change is required until that full review and that impact as it relates to the TVPA is completed, Brent.
So this was a snap election called by the Prime Minister. It cost $600 million to run it. Could it be a $600 million cabinet shuffle?
No, I think the Prime Minister would have been fine in terms of shuffling cabinet prior. I think what this was really about the pandemic. But, I think the old friend of mine, political friend of mine, Scott Reid, always says that if either you pull the election when you think you have the advantage, or the opposition will pull it from you when they think that they have an advantage in a minority government. So what you saw here was the Prime Minister and the Liberal Party of Canada feeling that they wanted to seek a mandate and had an opportunity to speak directly to Canadians. As you can see from all the other leaders of the other major parties, it was their determination that this election was completely unnecessary.
Now, you mentioned the pandemic. Often that's been glossed over when it comes to vaping, but I certainly think that there's a connection here, because if the government and the Liberals, now that they're returned to power, the ones that have taken a pretty strong approach when it comes to coronavirus, if they are so willing to take those measures, why wouldn't they just ban vaping? Like, for one, it just gets it off their plate. Two, they clearly have the power and maybe the gumption to do it.
Well, I don't think the way that the legislation and regulation is designed that the government has to make it their problem. They can leave it in Health Canada because there is no parliamentary review required. It's I go back to all politics is local. It's our job to make sure that the parliamentarians take responsibility for the changes, that they take responsibility for the impacts that this is going to have on jobs and on public health. There's a really important shift that's happening, but you got to remember that's one of the key elements of why legal is so important, is it does two things. One, it holds them accountable, but it also brings forward really core arguments and makes you review the truth. As we know, and I'm not making blanket statements about all politicians, but some politicians just talk. They say things that they're not educated on or have an understanding. A judge doesn't work that way. But ultimately, at a bureaucratic level, they have to make this bulletproof so that it doesn't go into a constitutional challenge in upper superior court, whether that be Ontario or if you bring it through a BC. Those tend to be the two provinces that you would usually target on these types of challenges because of the judicial and the judges in each of those jurisdictions. The judge doesn't care about your opinion. The judge cares about expert opinions. In this case, it'd be clinicians, researchers, professors. Those are the opinions that matter. And if you look at even under the Freedom of Information Act, I got a response from Health Canada in terms of the research that they did on age gating. And I'm telling you, they would have a challenge bringing that in front of a judge in terms of the type of research that they did, even compared to the type of research we did. And we're a small organization of 3 people. We're not the federal government.
Now, with the flavor ban and the process, I'd like to really get a kind of a handle on this. Was this a standard consultation process, or was this kind of the ancillary thing leading up pretty much like the last moments before Health Canada would implement this ban with Gazette 2? It didn't feel like a traditional consultation process.
Yeah, that wouldn't be my take on it, Brent. What I would think is if we look at the Gazette process, and this is what people should not only be concerned about, but extremely motivated by, is through the Gazette processes, what changes have we seen in Gazette 2 that we haven't seen proposed in Gazette 1? I think that's the fear from Health Canada. That's why I'm engaging at an MP level. That's why I'm engaging with the House and Parliament.
How do you mean? Just let me ask, Darryl, do you mean that there's often not a lot of change between Gazette 2 and Gazette 1, and that's what the worry is?
Very much so. And I'm extremely, I'm beyond concerned, Brent, to be honest, when it comes to that. It's why we're spending so much time on legal. That's why you get a Doug Elliott in Cambridge constitutionally. It's why you get a Kelly Lamrock, who's co-counsel in New Brunswick, the former attorney general there, to make sure that you fight for the rights of not only business owners, but the hundreds of thousands of consumers out there, like myself and my wife. So there's, Health Canada, it was very interesting in their Gazette process. They said that smoking costs, I believe it was $2,600 per smoker per year over the age of 27. How many millions of Canadians is that? So you're talking about 7,000 jobs. You're talking about billions of dollars, right? And it's just glossed over under this guise of youth. Meanwhile, it was StatsCan data, their own agency within the federal government, that said youth experimentation is going down. And I'll double down on this, on the hypocrisy, Brent, and we're going after this as well. Youth experimentation is highest when it comes to alcohol. Second is cannabis. There's all kinds of flavored alcohol, all kinds of marketing. We got flavored gummies. No one's going after any of that. You can find all kinds of crazy packaging. And I can make the argument that our alcohol has no benefit to society. Cannabis through recreational has very little benefit to society, as opposed to medical cannabis, which is a very different market. And then you have vaping. And when pressed by MPs about, well, do you want kids to see this product? I'm like, my kids can go on, and I hope this isn't too much for your viewers, but my kids can go on to pornography sites right now, and I don't hear anything about age gating, stopping, anything else. And there's a video that's happening that went on Facebook. I forget the gentleman's name off the top of my head, and I'll get back to you on that if your viewers like it. He was in BC, I believe, in your neck of the woods. Ordered some products, all flavored products, all 50 milligram from China, came to him, no age gating, no ID. Canada Post dropped it off. He kept it sealed, showed the shipping label, and then showed where it came from on Canada Post's website, opened it up, took out the products, and vaped. No one asked a single question. So under this, over-regulatory regime when it comes to the domestic market, I have principals telling me that they're still suspending kids out in Nova Scotia because they're getting vaping products, and they're getting them from all over the States and then selling them at a profit in their schools. So it's time to call out the hypocrisy of this. And if it has to be in court, so be it. But I think we have a political solution here, but we have to engage. And if MPs aren't going to return your calls, we got to go to their doors. I mean, my team will help any store owner or manufacturer follow up and send data and email and information, but we got to keep it local. It can't be, a lobbyist that's going to talk to 330 MPs across the country. That's not how the system works. So I think that I take the election as a reset for our strategy that we were deploying coming into the election, and now ramp it up. So, you use the statement last stand. Well, if this is our last stand, why wouldn't it be being extremely active and being extremely engaged and going after MPs? Because the amount of swing ridings, I think a lot of MPs were really scared in this election because they thought they were in very safe seats. And how many Liberal cabinet ministers went down? 3. We find there's a Liberal MP in Alberta, and the first time that I can remember, and I'm from Alberta, Brent. So that one surprised me. even though he's a very elegant speaker. To be frank, I can see why he was an attractive candidate. But it's now's the time. And I always say, like, what's nice about an election is the walls are down, as opposed to when they're in government, the walls are high. They're way harder to get a hold of. I think this election will give us one thing, is I think now the walls will be at medium. So as long as we can make salient arguments, be respectful, but be assertive, I think that that's the best opportunity we have to stop this madness, to be frank, and to be able to look at this in a way that says, this is harming public health. This is harming small businesses. And Brent, you know that I did all those press releases through the election. It was some of our highest media engagement since we really took comms to a different level in late 2018. But the biggest impact one was jobs. It was small business. That's what got picked up by most of the papers. So we have to remember that we fit into community and society, because we've been trying to make this public health argument for how many years? But the legal pathway will help us drive home the public health. Locally, it's about the MPs and it's about your business. It's about your consumers. And that's what they'll not only fight for, but it's the one thing they're afraid of, because what were they looking for in this election? Votes and support.
Let me ask you about the jobs and overall, just in terms of the process. I've been having a real hard time articulating this in a question properly over the last couple of months, because it's very strange. It just seems to me that Health Canada, as a regulator, owes some responsibility to the industry that it regulates. And considering it's a new industry and one that was brought into the fold under the promises of getting some stability, they're receiving none of it. And in fact, they're not even been given any time to make some of the changes that were asked, just in the last year with regards to nicotine concentrations and other things. And to just have the regulator completely pull the plug on hundreds of millions of dollars a year industry with all these thousands of jobs, it seems to me that there should be some protection from the regulator taking action like that.
I would agree with you, Brent. The challenge that I saw, one of the many challenges that I saw in Gazette one was this. They said that the flavor ban would greatly impact domestic business and would put international business at an advantage. We got in the US, Biden is talking about protecting domestic markets without starting a trade war. And when it comes to vaping, then I talked about the products coming in from China with that gentleman. And I hope that others share those types of videos. It seems like there's no protection for the jobs and for the domestic markets here in Canada. It's just an absolute decimation of the industry. And let me be clear, a flavor ban will destroy this industry. All of those small businesses, estimated from 1,000 to 1,400 shops, an estimated 7,000 jobs, they're gone. They're absolutely gone. And what I'm really proud of the industry is that they've really started to fight back. But more have to get engaged. More that watch your show have to get engaged. They have to reach out. They have to reach out to their members of parliament. Obviously, we're here to support in every way. But if you look at those MP meetings that I did, Brent, I had a retailer on all but three, a retailer or manufacturer on all but three of those meetings. So I too support making sure that it is local, because the industry's ultimate success is when that member builds that relationship. But I remember one MP when one of our retailers said, well, I have 11,000 customers. Should have seen that politician's eyes pop up, right? Especially on the eve of an election. So it's about having our voice heard, start getting used to doing events and becoming involved in our community as well. A lot of the big successful industries do this extremely well. It's called the perpetual campaign, Brent. It means that campaigning never stops. We have to think about it that way, because no other industry like ours has been under attack in such a short period of time, based on no level of science, just this moral crisis or moral panic, I would say.
Darryl, we just had Clive Bates on, internationally renowned tobacco control expert, policy expert, somebody who knows this business very well. He said something astonishing when it came to the cost-benefit analysis, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that. But first, let's have a quick listen. Give us an understanding of what Health Canada's done here, because they've got a rationale that they put out in their cost-benefit analysis that, if anybody really could understand this, I would think they'd be shocked.
It's a masterpiece of sophistry, to be honest. You look at this, I used to work in government myself, and you get used to looking at these things, and you'll see, 22 equations in their model, thousands of terms. You'll see language that's impenetrable, tables of numbers that you can't quite follow. And what you have to do is you have to go back to the original document, which they didn't put online. You had to actually go to Health Canada and ask for it. So they didn't want anyone to, see the sausages being made, if you like. And then what you find is, at the heart of all this fake sophisticated analysis is a giant assumption that vaping leads to smoking. And therefore, if you reduce vaping, you reduce future smoking. So the whole case, 93% of the benefits, the public health benefits of making vaping less attractive and banning flavors, are in the form of reduced smoking. It's really quite extraordinary, Brent, because at the heart of this, there is a misunderstanding. Which is that they have failed to understand the data that shows, yes, there's an association between vaping and smoking, because people who vape and smoke, many of the same characteristics incline people to both vaping and smoking, because they're similar behaviors. But that doesn't mean the vaping causes the smoking. Yet that is hardwired into the assumptions in their case. What they've done with the cost-benefit analysis is that they've counted up all the economic costs that they can find. Fair enough, that's a reasonable thing to do. $560 million in present value terms, which is the way that they estimate these things. We don't need to go into that. Okay, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for just banning something. Okay. Then what they've done is they've said, well, how much would vaping initiation need to decrease in order for the public health benefits to equal or exceed $560 million? Okay, and they've estimated that a 1.1% reduction in the initiation of vaping would cause those savings. But you're like, where's that number come from? How come a reduction in vaping causes so much sort of public health benefits? And you realize then that they've made this assumption that everyone who vapes has a 6 to 7 times chance of going on to be a smoker, which is a complete misreading of the data.
What are your thoughts on what you just heard?
So as you know, Brent, I'm not a clinician and I'm not a researcher. And I'm not an expert in any of these areas. That being said, I've talked to many. I agree with this analysis 100%. And it goes back to why we've designed communications, outreach, and legal, because they're going to have to explain that in front of a judge. And to me, that's where it will ultimately hit the road if we don't have a political solution to this. And I think as you see studies and this type of information come out over and over again, there will be a lot more pressure on Health Canada, specifically about asking for way more of how they come up with the conclusions. So I go back to the age gating and how they came up with the information for age gating. So that finally got released, and I sent that right over to the legal team. What I would suggest is this: you have to create a case against vaping that will stand up in court. We have to use the science and research that we have a ton of access to to showcase that vaping is the greatest harm reduction opportunity for the world's, and specifically in this case, Canada's largest form of preventable death. So I think Mr. Bates is a genius, and I love his work. But it's been validated by so many others that I've talked to. Now it's just a matter of getting the experts, and that's what's been, a lot of the work that's been done through the legal process so far is collecting the experts, putting these into affidavits, making sure that we have this information to push back. And I know Professor Sweener, I don't know if you had a chance to review his CG1 submission, but it really attacks so many of the flaws. So now you have to defend. And we know that well over 20,000 submissions just from consumers alone went in to say how important flavors are. So I'd be very curious on how Health Canada is going to report back on that. In addition to the hundreds that came out of industry and from professionals like Professor Sweener, and I'm pretty sure, Brent, you probably even did one of your own, maybe, as it relates to your experience with flavors.
Yeah, and I really want to get to this one point that Clive mentioned that you and I have spoken about before off camera, and that was they've attached mortality to this cost-benefit analysis. And when Clive had mentioned that the report that they are referencing to that backs up the statements in here that vaping actually causes death, and that's the cost savings that Health Canada says it's going to come from this program. I mean, that's spurious. If there's anything that could be called spurious, it seems to be that.
Very much so, and it comes to emissions and toxicology, and it's really an area that we have to consider. And I'm not ready to get into it now, but I'll give you it conceptually so you understand. When you do the toxicology testing, there's a certain way to do it where you can see how many cells die. So, but you can't do vaping on its own. What you have to do is you take vaping or vapor, and then you take cigarette smoke, and you see how many cells die when you put the cells in with the cigarette smoke versus how many you do. I have a pretty good sense of what those numbers look like, but I need to make sure I work with the proper labs and to get that data out. And when it is out, Brian, I'll be more than happy to come back and have an expert explain it, not me. But I'll make sure that you get full access to that. But on this is that it really drives back from a science point of view, the 95% less harmful. I would suggest this of the experts that they've used for that 20% mobility rate is go back and look at who worked with Professor Sweener on his CG1 in terms of how this data was pulled together. It's starting to crumble, the argument. You're seeing youth usage go down. You're seeing courts now having to be engaged and actually have to start to give dates. You're seeing all the affidavits and information come together. The reason that that's so important is that, one, not only can we share it with members, and I can't highlight that enough, we have to get out to our members of parliament on this one. But the second part of it is that you got to start getting either counter-science as a government agency, as from the Attorney General, and you have to disclose how all this came together. How did you come to these assumptions on all of it? And, I am very confident that the case for vaping is extremely strong. And I keep asking, why can New Zealand say they'll be free of combustible tobacco by 2025, the UK by 2030, Canada improved its outlook from 2035 to 2030 at 5% prevalence rate, and are destroying the most effective product to transition people to a less harmful alternative. So from that, how did they even come up with that number, Brent? How do you improve your outcome by getting rid of the product that's twice as effective as any other harm reduction product as it relates to combustible tobacco? So the case is there. And I think that's why you're seeing so many leaders in the industry making those investments to make sure that this product remains for years to come.
I think it's fair to say, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, or if your impression's slightly different, but it seems to me that this regulatory analysis that Health Canada has produced for the nicotine concentrations, and pretty much essentially the same one for the flavor ban, has opened a door to actually get in there and pick apart their approach, because it seems to be more and more hard to justify the conclusions, the assumptions and conclusions that they've made in here.
I don't disagree with it at all. And you know me, Brent, I do my homework. I always have. And what I try to do is look through every part when they come up with the gazettes. I can't find or justify anything of this other than a moral panic. So to me, I'm not sure how they got here, where the direction is. It was Health Canada. Was it the health minister who's driving this? And we need to find that out. But prior to that, what we really need to do is focus on the science and the research. Is this product perfect? No. Will youth experiment? Absolutely. But I go back to the question about, no one's going after pornography, but do kids experiment with sex, underage? It's the premise is not only ridiculous, but as a reformed smoker, it's insulting. So we'll keep fighting, and I think that's what many, and I'm, whether it's the organizations such as Heart and Stroke and Lung or Health Canada, if anyone thought that we were going to give up and just go away, I think they misunderstood how hard we fought to quit smoking in the first place.
Now, you just mentioned Heart, Stroke, Lung. There's also Physicians for Smoke-Free Canada that's really active, in fact, extremely active in Canada on this file. I'm choosing my words very carefully. If there's anything that you could say about some of these opposition groups, what would that be?
Your mandate is to get people off of smoking, not attack vaping.
Does it seem fair that their funding is coming, I think in some cases, from the actual federal government itself?
Absolutely not. I think that if we don't get our funding from government, we get our funding from industry. But it goes back to we've had as much impact over the last 10 years of getting people away from combustible tobacco and reducing their harm than anyone else. And even how they define youth up to 25 years old. Last time I checked, if you're 20 years old or 21 years old, I was running a company at 21, but you're going to define me as youth? I was married at 21, and you're going to define me as youth. So I can go to, the old adage that the old boys used to use, right, Brent? You could go to war at 18, but you couldn't drink till you're 21. So this prohibition has never worked. It has never worked. And the last piece of hypocrisy that I'd like to ask all these guys around is that, we're a harm reduction nation. So, fentanyl, safe injection sites. They're even talking about decriminalizing cocaine to help out the justice system. But we're going to criminalize flavors. And that brings you to the real kicker, the black market. One, drug dealers don't ask for ID. Two, you're putting another product in their bag. And three, black market isn't just criminals. So here's what you can do, Brent. I can buy a flavorless vape product. I can go to Bulk Barn and I can get food grade flavoring. So now I have a flavored product. Good luck legislating that out. But yet I don't know the difference between, even me, the difference between a water-soluble flavor and an oil-based flavor. So I buy an oil-based flavor, I put it in my flavorless vape, I got my grape, I put it in my vapor. Thanks to these regulations, we just created the next valley, except now we have the government to thank for it instead of the black market. And these products are available widely. Walmart, I already mentioned Bulk Barn, like you can pick all kinds of places, Loblaw, right? Like this is where these products are available. And if I don't know the difference between a water soluble and an oil-based flavoring, how about the other thousands of people who said, oh, I got a solution? It's dangerous. It is extremely dangerous. And so if there's people making these products for black market, either they don't know or they just won't care because it's cheaper. They're selling it out of the back of a van in Waterloo and they live in Toronto. Here you go, kids. I mean, the unintended consequences, and I'd like to do a series on that once just to break it all through. The unintended consequences of policy design that have not even been considered in their own risk assessment. Where did they put in the mortality rates of what happens if people use oil-based flavoring as a result of prohibition?
Darryl, we have a new section that we're doing here in some of our shows, and it's a little bit of a book quote. And here's the quote I'd like to read for you today to get your response to. And it is from Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, who was a French socialist in 1850. He's actually quite well known as a leader in anarchism, and he's a Marxist. So I'm reading something that would normally be considered from the other side of my political ideology. And here's the quote. To be governed is to be at every operation, at every transaction, noted, registered, counted, taxed, stamped, measured, numbered, assessed, licensed, authorized, admonished, prevented, reformed, corrected, punished. That is to be governed. Thoughts?
Normally you ask me on to talk about the political view. So I'll do that in this context. You expect your member of parliament or your provincial representative to have more information than you do. A politician can't do what every single individual would like to do. It's impossible. What you can expect is that they have process, that they have access to all of the information, and that they're making decisions on certain levels of expertise and voting with certain levels of expertise based on information that you could not digest throughout the nation on every single aspect of a massive government. So to that quote, I say impossible, responsibility, accountability, and transparency.
So let's move off of federal here, Darryl, and talk a bit about the provinces, because there was big news in Nova Scotia and in New Brunswick. There's obviously been the turmoil there. Fill us in on what you can on the provinces.
Yeah, so I will be extremely measured with what I say. I would say in New Brunswick, we're definitely have made it clear that it's business as usual until a judge makes it clear that it's not. In Nova Scotia, I think there's a great opportunity, specifically through the judicial, to work with this new government. I'm extremely optimistic. Based on early indications. So being able to be competitive and getting these markets back would also be extremely important to the federal case. So if you look at a lot of the affidavits, Brent, that we were putting together, they were initially designed for New Brunswick, but we're going to be able to use them in Nova Scotia. We're going to be able to use them at the federal government. And as we build even new affidavits and opportunities for experts, such as Clive Bates to participate, And so it's a lot, but it's actually the first time in a long time where I feel us pushing back to the level we are, specifically with legal, is really starting to work. So we felt like it was just being taken away, with flavors and, labeling restrictions, and even in your home province about a lot of the legislative changes that have happened there. I can say with a great smile on my face, this is as bullish as I've ever been on the industry. And it's no more gloom and doom. It's instead of feeling like we're pushing the rock up the hill and having it roll over us, is that we're building tools to get the rock up the hill.
How much of a help has it been with the international help, with like the 15 past presidents in that paper that was put out, which was, made a lot of news with inside the industry? Has the support started to grow even from without?
Immensely. And to understand how the judicial works in Canada is that they don't measure whether it came from Canada or whether it came from outside of Canada. It just matters that it comes from a reasonable democracy. So, for example, they'll weigh it from the US, they'll weigh it from the UK, but they wouldn't weigh it from China, or they wouldn't weigh it from Afghanistan. I just picked those countries at random, and but that's the way the judicial works, which means that we get to use a plethora of experts specifically on the affidavits. I think the key is the affidavits and cataloging and using the lawyers. We're very blessed to have. He's a doctor now. He just got his honorary doctorate from U of T, I believe. Dr. Elliott on our side, because you got to remember he also has the largest class action lawsuit in Canadian history, $1.5 billion on tainted blood. So the strategy is there, and but legal helps government relations, and government relations help legal. It's how you get your messaging in, both to the legislative branch and the judicial branch. So I think from that perspective, that's what I'm saying. We're building tools together, so it doesn't feel like we're just running from fire to fire to fire. Is that we have the tools, and now we're a fire crew, for lack of a better term. And it's been a lot of work, and this work started. It's not that we just started prepping for this when the CG1 came down. This has been a long year, certainly, and there's so many people to recognize and thank that you're better off not to than you are to, because you'll miss out on a ton, and we'll make a 2-hour show. But what I'd say to the viewers is that it goes back to that passion. Right, that passion that people in this industry have.
So the key takeaway then, as we wrap up, is the fact that you are still hopeful.
I'm beyond hopeful. I'm bullish. I know it's going to be tough. Right? I know it's going to be a big fight, but because I get to see how many of the pieces come together from, it's not just from a legal perspective or from a research perspective or from a GR perspective or from a community perspective. I think the greatest honor, and this will be the biggest thing I'll ever do in my career, Brent, because of the amount of lives that it impacts. It's a great honor, but being able to see it from all of those sections has brought me from 2018, where I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen, to, you know what, we should have fought back harder, but there's no way to forecast all of the things that happened, and especially through a valley that was just weathering the storm. And I thought we did a good job of coming out of that. A lot of people, their businesses took a lot of hits. So I'm proud of how they came through. But now is the time, and so I would say rather than optimistic, I'm bullish, because I see the fight in everyone, and for that I'm very thankful to be part of it. So I feel honestly, I feel very good.